Back in the old days, we'd sit up on the hill at Thornton Beach with a pair of binoculars and wait till you saw them breaking water, and then you went down and then caught them. But now you're just blind casting the whole beach, looking for different things like that.
San Francisco Bay and this coastline was just built for these fish.
I mean, the California coast, the Pacific Ocean, it's an animal, man. It's one of the wildest places in the world. It's hard to explain to somebody who's never been here.
You can look from Santa Cruz to San Francisco Bay and you're going to find different areas and backgrounds that look like it could be anywhere in the world.
Sandy beaches, rocky beaches, some of the most spectacular views you can see. Beautiful sunsets. We're west facing, so we get the sunsets on the beach.
The water is beautiful.
Birds, whales, dolphins, striped bass, there's sharks. I mean, we have it all. Salmon, steelhead, redwoods.
You drop down into Monterey and Carmel area and you might as well be in Hawaii. It's crystal clear water.
Every time I show up north, down south, I'm just in awe of it. It never gets old.
It is just easy to fall in love with this part of the coastline.
Striped bass, oh my God, I started fishing for striped bass in the bay with a little spinning rod and a Castmaster, and just caught hordes of them down in the South Bay when I was a kid.
Growing up near Santa Cruz, I would go down to the coast and we would bring the boogie boards, the surf fishing rods, kind of the whole deal, and so I've been fishing the coast my whole life.
I mean, you get off school and you'd go down to the bay and catch fish, or you'd get up on Saturday morning and just go down someplace and catch perch or fish all over the bay. There's a lot of fish back then. You could see schools of bass. There were certain cliffs you can get on and look down in the water. You can see a big purple, dark patch out there. It was either anchovies or 500 or 600 stripers in a school milling around. From thinking of the old days of where we used to see those big schools, that's where we find individuals now. We go out and hunt the same kind of places. But if I didn't know that fish were there in the past, I wouldn't go there. Kind of sad for these guys now that have to go out and just blindly hunt fish.
Right when I moved to college, I was like, I'm gonna go figure out this surf thing. But it was like fishing into a washing machine, and it chewed me up and spit me out.
You feel a striped bass pull, and it's a whole lot more than a trout can do.
Striped bass, they're just like the perfect fly rod fish. I mean, they crush flies. They pull so hard. Fishing streamers, the places they live, the migration.
It's kind of hard to explain surf fishing. My friend Tim Fromm put it this way one time. He said, if you want to learn how to surf fish, you walk down to the beach, you make a cast. You make a couple more casts, then you take 2 steps, you make another cast, and you just keep going until you find a fish.
People look at it as this really hard thing to tackle. Like when you go to fish a big giant lake and it just looks like so much water, you don't know where to start or where you should make a cast.
The best key to catching fish is going. So get up early, get out there when the winds are calm. Don't worry too much about the tides. I like a nice incoming tide. Some people like the outgoing tide. The old joke is the people who like the incoming tide are showing up right when the people who like the outgoing tide are leaving.
There's so much water to cover. How am I going to pull a fish out of this whole ocean, let alone with a fly rod and this little fly?
Snag your rod, nice shooting head on there, some sort of sinking line, stripping basket. You're gonna walk down to the beach, take a minute, observe what's going on, see what the whitewater's doing, what the waves are doing. You're gonna cast your fly out, strip your fly in, good, nice hard strips, no lazy stripping, that doesn't catch fish. You wanna work with the waves, you wanna dance with them. You don't wanna be fighting the waves, because if you fight the waves are gonna win. When the waves are receding, you're going forward. When the waves are coming at you, you're walking back, and get into rhythm with them. It takes some time and effort. You're not gonna go out on your first time surf fishing and say, wow, that was easy. That just doesn't happen. You go out there and you kind of get your ass handed to you. And then you go back again and you learn something else and you learn something else. And that process continues until you sort of achieve this like oneness with the ocean. And it's not always. I mean, sometimes, the ocean's just on a different level that you can't get to.
What I like about tying the flies is thinking about they're going to be used and they're going to catch fish. And that's what I enjoy.
Fly tying and the fact that you can take feathers from something and put it on a hook and end up catching something out of your own imagination and what you've created.
I like tying striper flies. I like tying steelhead flies, putting a little spin on some things. I like being able to make something unique. I like tweaking some things a little bit. Want a little bit longer material here, a little bit different color there.
Met a lot of good tyers, and every little bit they tell me that works, it just goes into the fly, The shape of the fly, the way the tail works on it, and where we fish it. The evolution of this fly has been through, I don't know how many fishermen have contributed to this thing, but it's just not my fly. It belongs to everybody. Surf fishing's changed a lot. The gear's not the same. The fish aren't the same. We're not getting the big schools of stripers, so we're not waiting for them to come to us. We have to go to them. So you have to cover miles of surf just to locate individual fish. You're fishing for small schools of fish. And I've seen it change from schools of small fish to schools of large fish, and then schools disappearing. Mostly all the change has been due to water exports in the valley. There was a huge chunk of fish that just disappeared. So the fish that we had got bigger. There were a lot of fish in the 20 and 30 pound range caught in the early 70s, I guess you'd say, because most of the recruitment of small fish had gone down the canal. You could fish the South Tower of the Golden Gate Bridge every day for a week and see 2 or 3 different schools of fish come by. You'd get 5-pounders one day, next day they'd be 10 or 15, and then every once in a while you'll see schools of 30 and 40 pound fish go by. That began to diminish from the 70s on and just kept diminishing. Every 10 years or so, there's a nice surge of fish. Maybe get a nice surf run or get a good run in the bay, but every time it recovers, it's never as good as it was before.
I think they're facing the same issues that all fish are facing. I mean, increased temperatures climate-wise, overfishing.
Same issues they've had for the last 30 years, 40 years in water exports. Lack of water, loss of spawning area, degradation of the delta. The delta's a nursery, and they grow up in the nursery, and that nursery's getting depleted.
I mean, they need clean, cold water just like any other fish, and that's becoming more and more challenging to find.
Yeah, it's really tough on the stripers right now.
They're facing the issue that, California is the largest agricultural producing state in the country. Not a lot of people know that. We produce about 75% of the produce for the United States. That's at odds with clean, cold water. And so we need to work with that industry and those people to find a balance. And if we can do that, we can live a little bit more harmonious with our wildlife, native or non-native. I mean, they're naturalized. They've been here since the late 1800s, so they're part of the ecosystem now.
They trained them from the East Coast over here to create a fishery and an industry in San Francisco Bay. From those first stocks of fish, those are what we're catching today, is from that original train ride. What they didn't realize is San Francisco Bay and this coastline was just built for these fish. The different areas they can hide, the temperatures, the bait fish that are all over, our river structures, the delta, all our waterways here, the stripers basically just maximized and just made home here. And they still have the same mentality they had on the East Coast, to where they will migrate out of the bay, down probably to Monterey, maybe a little south of that, and then right back up and spawn up in our river systems.
What am I going to catch today? What's happening down here? You know, for perch, stripers, or whatever?
Stripers.
Okay.
Stripers. They've been nice ones too.
There's a lot of, I guess you could say a little bit of politics with stripers, right? It's a love-hate. Like, a lot of people think they don't belong here, and they're affecting a lot of the other fisheries and the native fish that have been here.
It's a nuanced topic because striped bass have been here for so long. And if you look at what impacts anadromous species the most, invasive species way down on that list. Without a doubt, striped bass eat native anadromous species, native fish for sure.
Yeah, I can see them affecting, they're a very aggressive species that take over a lot of waters, but I think they're here to stay. And I think, being a fisherman, just embracing their presence, and hopefully there can be a new balance, like with anything these days. So we can appreciate having the stripers, but also not take away from our native steelhead and salmon.
A lot of people want to get rid of striped bass, and we see a huge effort from the water districts because there's all these striped bass anglers who advocate for cold, clean water in the Delta. And so if they're not there advocating for cold, clean water, that's bad for steelhead, that's bad for salmon, and certainly bad for striped bass. But it's good for the water districts because they have less people they need to fight when they want to pull all that water out. I do think they provide some value in creating advocates for clean, cold water here in California. But I can't stand on 2 feet and say that they're good for salmon and steelhead. That said, a lot of the waterways and systems that they exist in are fairly doomed from an anadromous species standpoint. You've got dams in the wrong places, largely hatchery, run fisheries, Lower Sacramento, San Joaquin. There's not a lot of native salmon and steelhead left in those fisheries, and probably no chance of a huge return. And if there is, then striped bass won't be a problem. If we do have a huge return, we won't have any issues. They're not up in our coastal, pure, native, where steelhead and salmon have the most potential. They're not in those systems.
There's a lot of other influences with dams and other waterway restrictions. Hopefully we can just come together because the stripers are not going anywhere.
The conservation efforts that I think are most important to just everybody out there is just think about your impact. Do our part to make sure we're having as little impact on the fisheries as possible, and also being a good person, just picking up garbage and trying to clean up and things like that. I see that stuff like more as how do we manage ourselves to make the world a better place versus, we could talk about dams getting removed and things like that, but I'm on a board that's what they do, right? That takes 30, 40 people to even scratch the surface on that. But us as individuals, just minimizing our impact as much as possible on the fisheries. Find your local fishery, figure it out, your life will be better.